Welcome all to the Mindfulness Workshop series. Today we're going to be discussing feeling rest and accessing rest in the body, but I'll give it a couple of more minutes to allow for people to join. So welcome again. I'm Vivian Hermes, and I am the facilitator for the Mindfulness Workshop. And I thought today would be dedicated to how to access rest in our bodies. So before we dive into the topic of the day, I wanted to kind of create a baseline of understanding, as we always do with these sessions, of what mindfulness is. And at UCLA, we define it as paying attention to the present moment experience with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with what is. Now, this is just one definition of mindfulness. You might go out there and come up against all sorts of different programs that offer their own definitions of what it is, but all have these specific components to whatever words they use and however they choose to define mindfulness. And the first one is that there's this intentional awareness that you're using to apply. Awareness is part of our natural build. We are able to exact our attention on different things. And so in practicing mindfulness, you can do it by focusing on a particular thing. Oftentimes you'll see it, and we'll practice with it a little later on with our breath. Or you can have other anchors and focal points, such as your body sensations, or even things external to you, such as just an object outside of you, whether it be the sky or being in nature. You can have really open awareness that you can offer up, so you kind of just let things happen and you're taking them in a popcorn fashion. That all require that you bring in and bring online your intentional awareness skill. It's also very experiential. It's not conceptual in any way. You're tuning into your senses exactly as they're happening and how they're showing up and how they're calling your attention. Additionally, there's this element of inquisitiveness and curiosity. And that's so that if you think about it, we can narrow in on conclusions and ideas and notions and biases very quickly in evaluating a situation. But when we practice mindfulness, we try and allow for a little more air to come into the space, because from a place of curiosity and inquisitiveness, anything is possible. And finally, we do it all in the present moment. We do it with our sensations, our breathing, whatever we decide that we're going to focus our attention on as it's happening in real time. We're not thinking about future events or worrying about them. We're not ruminating about the past and reflecting on them. What mindfulness is not, and I just wanted to clear up some misconceptions around mindfulness. It's not about clearing your mind. A lot of people think, oh, there's no way I can practice mindfulness because I can't settle my mind enough to practice mindfulness. Well, the good news is that you don't have to clear your mind to practice mindfulness. Although what happens when you practice these sorts of techniques is that it actually starts to steady your awareness and steady your attention. You become really aware of where you're putting your attention and when it's shifting. So in doing that, it actually creates a settling in the mind. And with steady practice, there is some, you could say, experience, maybe short-lived, maybe a split second where you feel, ooh, there's no activity happening, where we can say that it kind of clears the mind. It's also not about functioning on autopilot. So when we practice mindfulness, we're not letting our mind just go in all different directions without us bearing witness and staying steady with wherever it's going. So we can bring this quality of mindfulness to observing how we are experiencing, even when we are in autopilot. Like for me right now, I'm moving my hands. I can stay aware of the fact that I'm gesturing without without any sort of intention, staying aware of the fact that my hands are moving. It's also not about relaxation. If we can bring you back to the definition, the last part of that definition of mindfulness, it says that you're willing, with a willingness to be with what is. And sometimes what's happening and what is actually unpleasant. You might be experiencing pain, either emotional or physical. So although relaxation, because we end up gathering all our senses, can have a relaxation effect when we practice mindfulness, it's not necessarily the goal, nor is it the purpose of it, right? So, but it can definitely be a side effect. The benefits of mindfulness are numerous. There are way more than the ones I've listed here, but these are the ones that kind of align with the focus of today's talk, which is how to access rest. So what it does is the research shows that mindfulness practices begin to slow our heart rate. People that practice mindfulness tend to report that they're sleeping better, more deeply, and wake up more refreshed. A lot of people that I coach actually say that the mindfulness practices themselves actually make them sleepy. And my advice to people when they experience practicing mindfulness is that, to check in with yourself to see, am I actually sleep deprived? Is my body telling me that I actually need to take physical rest, which is sleep, in this moment? And if that's the case, let the mindfulness practice lead you to, snoozing, as opposed to actually continuing with the practice of staying aware of whatever you were focusing on. Additionally, mindfulness practices have shown to improve alertness, to deepen concentration, and to also improve our digestive systems. The first practice I wanted to share with you all is one that you can do just as you go about your daily routine at any point when you're shifting, especially between maybe you were walking to your desk and you sat down, maybe before you start working on the computer or logging into the meeting, maybe taking a couple of seconds. This takes 16 seconds to do. So you may be taking 16, 32, however many times, going through the box breathing exercise. So with that, I invite you to stretch up and settle in. And the way we do the box breathing is we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, then we're going to hold before we breathe out. We're going to hold it for 4 seconds, then we're going to breathe out for 4 seconds, and then we're going to hold before we breathe in, and then we're just going to repeat it. So we'll do it for a couple of rounds together so you can get the feel of it. So breathing in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhaling, breathing out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And holding again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do it again. Breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Breathing out. 1, 2, 3, 4. and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now letting your breathing to go to its natural rhythm and just checking in with yourself what that was like. Just do basically 32 seconds of practice with box breathing. As I mentioned, this sort of breathing can actually be brought into your daily life exactly how it is. You don't have to create a special time to do it. You can do it as you transition from one activity to the next. So I wanted to focus on rest because there's a deep importance of not only having a lot of activity and getting things done, but when we do rest, a lot of times we don't actually give it that sense of importance. We'll just plop down on the couch and, take up a snack and watch mindless TV or scroll through our smartphones or iPads. We don't actually figure out or plan for how we're going to effectively rest. And this is it's as important as doing a to-do list for the things you want to get done, is to have a go-to list for what you consider restful and really tapping into those things that you find deep rest and relaxation in. But first and foremost, before we can rest, we need to recognize, is it safe at this point to rest? Am I in a place personally where I can take a rest? Again, it doesn't have to be an hour long or even 30 minutes, but in this moment, do I feel safe enough to take a breather, to step away, to have water, whatever it is that you would find supportive and restful. In recognizing when it's safe to rest, finding out these ways that you find most replenishing, most nourishing is really important, because it helps us shift the focus from whatever the thing is or whatever the things are. There can be multiple things that could be stressors in your life, and helping you shift it to your internal response and how you externalize your response at the same time. So it's really important to not just recognize, yeah, it's really important for me to rest, but also have a game plan as to how you're going to rest, and recognizing if it is safe in that moment to do so. And there are multiple ways, and I want to take some time to kind of speak to all the different types of rest that are out there and speak to how they might manifest, or you might get a hint, just maybe that's the kind of rest, or that's the sort of activity that I'm kind of getting overwhelmed by. Let me access types of that particular type of rest. We think about rest, it's one of the most underused, under leveraged, but doesn't require any sort of medication or chemicals. It's safe, and we know that it's safe and effective as a way to manage our daily stressors, and it's available to us in so many ways. And in the same way that our brain is designed to activate and do things and accomplish things and be productive, it's actually most efficient when it's allowed to move between periods of activity and focus, and downgrading down to a period of less focus and rest. And if we think about it, you can, all throughout nature, you see that happening. You'll see that everything has its cycles of activity and cycles of inactivity. You can think of it as like, even in a wave, you have the crest of the wave and then it fades down, then another wave comes up and fades down. So initially it might feel a bit counterintuitive to say, oh, I need to spend time resting, but it actually, in those periods, there's a lot of integration happening, a lot of healing that's happening. And so it actually makes for, and the research supports this, it makes for more productivity and more presence for your activities, and a sharper mind when you do take the time to rest effectively. So we'll start at the top of this rest ring, we'll call it. There's 7 different types. And the first one is creative rest. And the way you would know that you're in need of rest from a creative standpoint is when you feel like you're uninspired, or you're experiencing creative mental blocks. It might be exhibiting itself as like feeling as though you're in a rut. And ways to meet creative stress is to get out into nature, take a walk through a park, along the beach, go for a hike, go to a local garden, whatever allows you to be in spaciousness and in some sort of natural landscape. Do things just for fun. A lot of times we go from task to task to task. Like, think about the things that you would create if you didn't have to, like things that you enjoy, whether it's baking, that came to mind right now offhand. You could be gardening, do the things that allow you to just have fun and that don't call upon you to, as a task. That's something that a must to do, to share, to sell, to provide. And finally, you can immerse yourself in the creativity of others. So that could mean going to concerts, going to shows, especially now that the world is opening up again. There's plays, there are museums, these are all opening up. Here in Southern California, we have access to a lot of botanical gardens, open air museums. And so I just invite you to go out and explore and relish and savor the creativity of others. The side is social rest. And a lot of times this will come up when we feel overextended socially or in our relationships. The truth of the matter is that we have relationships that can be very draining and challenging and really feel like they're taking a lot from us. And then there's those that are really easy. They're fulfilling, they're kind of replenishing, actually. We feel seen, we feel heard. And the key here is to maintain a balance between those relationships that feel draining and those that feel replenishing, and not to get too caught up in feeling any sort of guilt, any sort of, judgment around, oh, I shouldn't feel this way about this relationship, recognizing that you're just catching it in this moment, that it feels, tiresome or exhausting. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the whole picture around this relationship. And just making sure that any given moment, you're offering yourself balance when it comes to your relationships. And so how to meet that, I want you to reach out to the people that you think and you feel good being around, and make time to be with them, and feel okay around saying no to any sort of engagements or any sort of social invitations that you feel won't serve you. And if you do have to go, if you feel a sense of obligation, to always make time to recharge, either before you go or when you're done, or both, right? Taking some time to recharge. Additionally, another way to kind of shift a relationship is to change the scenery. So if it's someone that you meet on a regular basis for dinner and drinks, maybe meeting at a park, meeting at a museum, shifting the scenery to re-engage and shift the dynamic of how you relate to each other also helps with social depletion. And also, finally, don't multitask when you're amongst friends, especially those that are replenishing. Put that device away and you can even limit the size of the group that you're interacting with, if that helps, to really help you have that one-on-one time and give your full attention to the person or the people that you're interacting with. On the other side of creative is the spiritual rest. And this is when we feel really disconnected from others and the rest of the world. Some of us might be experiencing it now with all the upheaval that's going on, both in the United States as well as around the world. And it's really important that when we're experiencing spiritual depletion to connect with our sense of purpose and our sense of belonging, to help replenish and provide for spiritual rest. We all need to feel loved, accepted, understood, and connected. And we have to find ways to do that. So my advice is to join a spiritual community or a faith-based organization or a group that aligns with your interests and values. Additionally, I really invite you to consider volunteering for a cause that's meaningful to you. And you can always also leverage the support of a coach or a mentor and work with them to help you create that link with your short-term goals and what you're going through right now, to the bigger picture of what, how it relates. How are you actually bringing value and your unique voice to whatever you're doing in this moment? So those are the three. We're not going to go into deep practice with them for this time that we're together, but I wanted to touch upon them because they are part of the configuration of the different types of rest that are available. The other ones are physical rest, so coming back to the right side. And physical rest is kind of easy to notice because your body will let you know by expressing either pain or fatigue. Your body will start communicating to you that it is experiencing a need for physical rest. And the thing is physical rest, we always think, oh, again, is it just about laying down? But actually, no. Both active or passive. Active types of physical rest are things like getting a massage or exercise or stretching or doing yoga. These are all ways where you can actually create activity that induce physical rest in the body. Passive ways of physical rest means things like sleep or taking a power nap. And how to do it, how to do these activities for, passive, getting some sleep. Remember that we have circadian clocks. So for example, if you are going to take a nap, either having it be between 20 and 30 minutes or an hour and a half, because that's how our circadian clock is built. You don't want to wake up after 30 minutes, anytime in that between 30-minute and hour and a half range, because you've actually kicked into REM sleep. And when you wake up, you're actually going to be more tired. So if you want to feel refreshed, keeping the naps at 30 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes. Additionally, you can also practice mild exercise and fit that into your schedule, maybe 3 times a week. That could mean something to the effect of, like, especially for going back into the office, is parking the car a little further away from the office entryway and walking, extending the walks, or when you go grocery shopping, parking a little further away and allowing yourself to have more time to get in those steps. So it doesn't have to be these very strict ways, but we can kind of tweak our existing schedules and our existing demands to fit our needs for greater mild exercise. And finally, in terms of accessing physical rest, there's always the option to reach out to, again, professionals, whether it be getting a massage or getting an acupuncture treatment or chiropractic care. These are all ways to help support your physical body and induce rest in your body. For mental rest, this could come up as feeling very distracted or overwhelmed, or like a lack of ability to focus on a situation or a project. It'll show up as brain fog or you might start sensing that every task that you're doing is taking up so much more energy and that much more time to do. And so when we practice mental rest, it allows us to disconnect from our cognitive demands and put the mind at rest. So the invitation here is to address mental rest, is to take short breaks throughout the day. You can even set timers, reminders, and just step away, or even turn your eyes away from the screen if you're a person like me that works quite a bit in front of a computer screen. And just take a few deep breaths. Maybe practice box breathing. Again, it only took for one breath 16 seconds, for two rests 32 seconds. If you can just do that for 2, 3, 4 times, it would actually help reboot the mind. Also, reducing the tax on the mind, the taxing on the mind of keeping things, having to track a bunch of things. Make lists. I put reminders into my phone's calendar. So even though it's not an appointment or something, I still put it in my calendar so I see it and that it'll come up as a reminder. So finally, for mental rest, nothing can take the place of good sleep, and good sleep hygiene is what it's being referred to these days. And one of those things is about setting aside your smart devices about an hour before you do go to sleep so that you can begin to allow the mind to unwind before it actually takes rest and sleeps. You want to create those kinds of buffer periods as well. So that your mind can decompress. Additionally, if you are going to take time off, and if you have that luxury to take time off from work, to create periods before you start the vacation and at the end of a vacation to kind of reintegrate your experience. So integrate into the time off. So you don't want to be flying the day after your time off, maybe giving at least 12 hours, or even a day if you can afford that, between, for example, your first day off of work to the start of any vacation you might be taking. And then again, allowing that buffer at the end so that you can come back and unwind and restart your week, your work week. Emotional rest is experience when you're under massive stress. It normally arises when you start sensing yourself to be very overwhelmed and maybe even be experiencing some irritability. When we feel our emotions are overstretched, and when you're overstretched in that way, you can't really spring back into your neutral states as easily. So in order to manage emotional rest and to bring that online, it's really important to take a break from saying yes. Offer yourself the compassionate stand to ask when a request is made of you, to ask for time to consider it before answering yes or no of whether you want to commit to it or not. Making sure that you have outlets where you can share your feelings, whether it's talking to a friend or meeting with a therapist and sharing with them, or connecting with your local EAP program if your employer provides that. Or it could be as simple as writing out your feelings by journaling. So just using different ways to be able to get it out of the mind and out of the heart and externalize it some way is really important. The other way of managing emotional stress is practicing mindfulness. You can revisit the session we did on how to work with emotions in this series. So, look back on that video and how to specific practices on how to work with emotions, especially difficult emotions. But the cool thing about mindfulness is it helps you not only manage the difficult emotions, it also helps you to really savor and expand on positive emotions that you might be experiencing. Finally, sensory rest. that comes up as that mild anxiety you might be feeling when you get a notification in your email box or a notification on your phone, or you feel an overwhelm of stimulation. Sometimes the overwhelm can come up, for example, when we're stuck in traffic, or you're in a place that has a lot of different sounds. So the ambient sound is creating kind of a sensory overload. Um, these are just some ideas, or a place that has a lot of lights. If there's strobing lights, we can kind of overload our senses in various different ways. So how do we find ways to support our experience? We can do it by, first of all, turning off notifications if that's possible, even if it's for short periods. Like, okay, for my lunch hour, I'm going to turn off my notifications just so that I can practice mindful eating, for example. Or even experiment with trying a full-blown digital detox for, during the weekends or in the evenings, making sure that you know, and now the phones are getting very smart and giving us our functionality to be able to stop notifications after a certain hour. So I invite you to really explore those and see how those fit into and support you in trying to ensure that you create rest in your day. Additionally, you can, we were talking about what mindfulness is. You can practice mindfulness with the stimuli. In the last session that we had, we actually recognized that, hey, thinking is happening in this moment, and these are the elements. We practice see, hear, feel. And so you can actually practice with a stimuli, turning towards it, turning away from it, anchoring into other things. So there's ways to practice with stimuli to ensure that you can create at least momentary sensory rest. So I wanted to revisit this particular. We're going to be practicing, the longer practice we have for today is around the feel space in terms of accessing rest. So I wanted to kind of have a refresher. So in the feel space, when we're feeling into our emotions, a lot of times we might think that we're having physical sensations related to an emotion, like our heart might be fluttering, or we might have a clenched throat or chest or belly, or tension in our shoulders because we're stressed out. But sometimes all it is it's a clenched belly, and we can release it, and it actually doesn't have an emotional component. So we can check in to see if there's relative emotional peace in in our experience. Alternatively, when we're kind of opening ourselves up to all our physical sensations that we might be experiencing, there might be areas in our body where there's an absence of sensation. There might be blank areas where we're not feeling any sort of sensation. And we can label those as rest, kind of get curious about them, and kind of settle our awareness on that area and our attention, and see how that feels. So now I invite you to practice with me the practice of feel rest. And the key is that we don't have to actually rely on external conditions to access rest. Because it's part of our nature, we can actually turn our attention to the parts that are actually feeling rest in the moment. And so to begin, let's just start by tensing a part of the body and keeping another part relaxed. So I invite you to make a fist in one hand and allow the other hand to just rest on your leg or at your side, and squeezing that one hand really tight, that fist, making sure that your attention goes to the actual hand that's restful. So keeping the focus on the relaxed hand. You can recognize that your whole body doesn't have to be relaxed for you to have access to a part that's restful. And letting go of the fist, noticing the shift that's happening when you do release the fist. that there is a relaxation maybe, or just a shift happening, shift of sensations from tensing to maybe some vibration, relaxation, if that's accessible. And so we're going to work with using the label rest, just using that to label areas of rest that we experience in our body. We're going to scan the body. And if there's any areas where there is activity, vibration, tingling, tickling, temperature, you can label that as feel, because these are sensations that we're feeling. But if there's any areas that feel restful to you, you would use the label rest. The way we use these labels is we can say them at any volume, you can say them out loud in the way I would just said it, which is rest, feel, really maintaining a matter-of-fact, gentle tone as you do it. You do it about every 5 to 10 seconds. You can also say it really softly to yourself. Feel, breath. Or you can even whisper it to yourself, even lower than that. Or you can just in your mind say it to yourself. But whichever volume you choose to use, just invite you to maintain a soft, gentle, matter-of-fact tone. So again, if you're feeling the rest in that area, you say rest. If it isn't restful for whatever reason, you label that as feel without getting caught up in the story of, oh, the reason why it's feeling this way is because. So staying with just the raw sensation that you're experiencing. Up and settle in. I should mention that you can do this practice in any posture. So if you want to pause this for now and lay down, if that's helpful, you can do that. You can do it sitting down, you can do it standing. So if your attention gets pulled away as you do this practice, just staying with the rest. And you can also do this with your eyes open or closed or anything in between. Just to invite you to maintain a soft gaze if you do decide to have your eyes open. And that's just to minimize the sensory experience in the visual field. Just want to really sense into the physical sensations of rest. And we'll begin at the feet. So begin by anchoring your attention there, noticing if there are any sensations at the feet, at the top of the feet, at the toes, the bottom of the feet. Every 5 to 10 seconds, noticing if what just happened, what you were just experiencing was rest, or whether it was sensations, in which case you would use the label feel. I'll help by demonstrating, noticing the feet, feel, feel, rest, Maybe other areas of the body might be calling your attention. That's normal. Continuing to redirect the attention to the feet. Noting what's happening and labeling it the best you can. And now allowing your attention to move up and notice the ankles, the lower legs, the knees, maybe even the thighs and upper leg. Noticing if there are any sensations, labeling that as feel. If you do find any, noticing any areas of rest. If you do find areas of rest, allowing your attention to stay with the rest if it's there. You can do this part of the practice by noticing one leg for a couple of seconds, then shifting to the other leg, noticing what's going on there for a couple of seconds and labeling that. Or you can zoom out, just notice legs. Are they restful? Are they active with sensation? Feel or rest. Noticing, labeling, being present for whatever the body is communicating at the legs. Now, moving the attention up to the trunk or torso. And here we have so many organs, our lungs, our belly, our intestines, the stomach. There might be a lot of actual feel activity, or there might be rest. So noticing what areas is there activity, feel, and are there areas that are relatively still and restful, in which case you can label those as rest. Remembering to create space between the labels, so allowing for 5 to 10 seconds to go by before you label what just happened. Not getting too caught up on getting it just right, recognizing that in just a few minutes or a few seconds, rather, you're going to have another opportunity to label. Notice, note, label. Feel, rest. The mind may wander in so many different directions. If you happen to find it moving away from the practice, just gently bringing it back to the area of your trunk, your torso, your back, and noticing any areas of sensation, any areas of rest. When you note that, letting the labels help guide with the label of feel, with the label of rest. Now shifting your attention one more time to your hands, your fingers, your wrists, lower arms, elbows, upper arms. Notice, is there activity? Is there movement, vibration, pulsation, tickling, temperature? Maybe they feel damp in the palms, between the fingers. Noticing any and all sensations that might be there. And as you notice them, labeling them as feel. But if there are any areas that are showing no activity, are blank, are still, labeling those as rest. So now continuing with the practice, but offering our attention exclusively, exquisitely to our hands and our arms. Feel, rest. And now shifting our attention one more time to our neck and our throat and our head. Checking in, noticing any areas of sensation in and around the head, in and around the neck. Doing our best to note it for about 5 to 10 seconds, soak into whatever it is, whether it's restful or active, and then labeling it as feel or rest. Maybe even checking at the eyes, at the nose, at the cheeks, at the lips and the ears. Letting that be the area of focus and noticing, is it active? Is it restful? Staying really curious and open. And now doing one final shift of attention by zooming out your awareness and just noticing the body seated here or laying here or standing as a whole. Is it experiencing a lot of activity and sensation, movement, vibration, fluttering? Or is it mostly restful? Might sense that as still as we happen to sit, there's actually micro movements happening. Or you might notice, it's actually very restful. So recognizing from the perspective of mindfulness, the key is the noting and the labeling, not necessarily the actual sensation. So continuing to label activity as feel, inactivity as rest. Now taking one last moment to offer some gratitude to this body that it's made it through all these decades as your vehicle in life. You know what this body's been through. You can spend some time recognizing how much it's been through, how much it's overcome. How much it's continued to be of service. You can also give yourself some gratitude for having spent this time to offer your attention to your body, to sense into its activity, its communication, its restful states. Thank you all for joining me in that practice. So that is the practice of feel rest. And of course, if you have any questions, reports, or takeaways, you're more than welcome to, offer them via email, or you can always offer them up at future sessions. I wanted to share these resources before we end. Feel Rest is a component of the Unified Mindfulness program. It was linked to the program that we did before, the technique of see, hear, feel. As I mentioned, we kind of revisited that in a previous slide. My affiliation is with the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. And what I offer today in the Feel Rest is actually a combo of a body scan that we do at UCLA with a focus on the noting and labeling through unified mindfulness. So if you're interested in a body scan practice, there are beautifully guided body scans that are around 12, 13 minutes through the UCLA Mindful app. If you go to uclahealth.org/MARC/audio, we have them translated in many, many different types of languages, many different practices of varying lengths. So I invite you to check out the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. I want to thank you for being with me again. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.